Welcome to those who've joined. I think we'll probably give it to 2 minutes past just to allow for those who are still trying to join to access. I think we'll kick off. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining today, or good morning, I should say, to this Canada Virtual Roadshow. Today we're going to be exploring a reputational risk, a very important topic, and a topic which impacts everyone, no matter how big or small your company or as an individual. So I'm Rosie Dene, and I will be guiding you or moderating today's session, and I'm the Innovation Manager here at Lloyd's. So we're going to kick off with a reputational risk 101, which will be given by my colleague Ivan Spence. Ivan Spence sits in the innovation team and actually oversaw a project where we produced some research around reputational risk. And then after this 101, we will then head into a panel discussion where we will be hearing from various people along the reputational risk chain, and I'll give you introductions into those later about how they perceive reputational risk from sort of the market side and also a sort of a risk measurement side of reputation. So without further ado, I will pass over to Ivan, who will be guiding us through the sort of reputational landscape, as it were.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And Asima, if you could please put my slides up. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to be here and looking forward to introducing you to intangible assets and safeguarding reputation as the most important. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Asima. Lloyd's, myself, working with KPMG, and we have produced 3 intangible asset deep dives into the areas you can see on your right. So these will be intellectual property, human capital, reputation, and brand. We came to this because risk managers highlighted intangible assets as the kind of largest asset class that they needed safeguarding and help with risk transfer solutions. So it was our job to kind of put down the best practices, firstly for safeguarding your intangible assets, and then where can you use risk transfer and insurance in particular as a method to protect your intangible assets. So you can read these papers or just the executive summary, because some of them might be a bit long, at the web link there, which I will share with you after my presentation. As you can see here, 48% of risk managers, when we surveyed them, said that reputation and brand was the intangible asset their company was most focused on. Hence, we're here today, and there's a wealth of expertise in the Lloyd's market and products there to help customers and clients protect their reputation and their company's reputations and recover from reputational crises. If we could go to the next slide, I'll kind of dive into why reputation is so important. So here are the numbers. Firstly, it's important to remember that nowadays we're in a highly digitalized world where there's a 24-hour news cycle, and social media means that anyone can be a journalist now and potentially impact your company's reputation. Word of mouth has never kind of been so effective and traveled so fast. But as you can see here, the numbers as well kind of support this fact that reputation is one of the key drivers of value for a company, particularly in consumer facing industries like technology, telecommunications, healthcare, and then consumer goods and such. But according to research and our research, we found that on average, 25% of a company's market value is directly attributed to its reputation. It's a very large percentage. And obviously, corporate reputation accounts for 35.3% of the market capitalization of the world's 15 leading equity market indices. This is huge amounts of money and huge amounts of value, which reputation provides for companies. If we could move to the next slide, please. So how do you understand your value of the reputation that your company has, and what are the best ways to really look into your company's reputation and the value that it adds to your company? Firstly, there's customer opinion. You can use the Net Promoter Score, as I'm sure some of you already have heard about, reviews and ratings on Google, on the internet, and potentially on broadsheet papers and other kind of reviewing mechanisms. Reputation indices, as you can see here, these provide really in-depth analysis of your reputation and drawing data using machine learning from many different sources across the world to understand your company's reputation in the here and now. Very important and very useful tools to use. And then finally, financial metrics. This is much more for accountants and such who can measure reputation through determining the monetary value of your reputation. Again, looking at royalty rate and dividends. If we could move on, please, to the next slide. So how do stakeholders evaluate reputation and brand? This is very important to understand. In our report, we broke it down into two key areas. This is capabilities. So what capabilities does your company have in terms of providing a great product, a great service, and how does that translate to the stakeholders? Do they value your capability in providing a phone that doesn't break, has a long battery life, or a piece of technology that really helps drive their efficiencies within their company as a service? And then capabilities being one, we move on to character. This is growing every day. Again, I mentioned the 24-hour news cycle. It's no longer possible for companies to kind of stay quiet. Character, you have to really shout from the top of your building about the values that your company holds, and understanding the key, I guess, changing shift in thought processes and activism within societies to understand where your company can do better to help promote the values that the customers you supply products to really can kind of feed into and are drawn to your company because of the values that they hold themselves are mirrored in your company's values. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So what can a reputational crisis look like? These are just three small examples. There's many examples out there, and I'm sure the experts who are in the panel will be able to kind of dig deeper into further examples and case studies of reputational crises. But obviously, product malfunctions. No one wants their product to stop working, to potentially cause harm or injury. And there's been many cases in the last year even where products have maybe not performed to the best of their abilities and caused reputational harm to companies and organizations. Advertisement campaigns can be misinterpreted. Again, this is very important. Again, with the 24-hour news cycle, there's always space for adverts on social media as well. And there's potential for people to really dig deep into the adverts and point at things which they may not agree with and question, I guess, the character and the values that your company are putting out there through different means of media. And we have supply chain issues, again, very topical at the moment, particularly in Britain, where we are having a few supply chain issues, but this can really impact a company's reputation when demand grows for a product, but you can't provide the product for your customers who are demanding it. It can really impact the kind of viewpoint that they take on your capabilities. And again, these are just a few examples, but there are many more reputational crises that are waiting around the corner and have potential to really impact your company's share price and the bottom line, I guess. So finally, I will move on to the products in the market. As I said at the beginning, Lloyd's and the London market has great expertise in reputational crisis management and helping clients with their products, providing them with services added onto their products, as you'll learn more about later with Beazley and Neil's products, along with using Polecat to help clients measure their reputation in real time and understand their reputation on a more granular level. But as you can see, there are many more products in the market, and there's a wealth of expertise here to help small to medium enterprises to fairly big enterprises, which maybe not the Googles or the Facebooks who already have big marketing capabilities and the ability to react to reputational crises, but particularly for those who may not have those capabilities or resources that the large companies have. There's loads of products in the market which can help. And obviously, if you speak to your broker or someone you know in the market, they'll definitely be able to help you and point you in the right direction towards these expertise and products which may be able to help your companies react to a reputational crisis. But anyway, that's all the kind of boring stuff over. I will pass back over to Rosie now, who will introduce you to the panel and the real experts in this space. But thank you for listening, and have a nice day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ivan. And by no stretch of the imagination is this boring. As you highlighted, this is a hugely valuable intangible risk, which all companies face with the 24-hour news cycle. And as you cited in your report, potentially a $17 billion industry, those $1 trillion industry at stake here. So we have a fantastic panel. So thank you to our three panelists for being here today to discuss this further. First of all, we have in our panel Matt Humphreys, who works at Loctons. Matt, if you can give us a little wave, thank you. So Matt heads up the crisis management division at Loctons, and there he oversees and is responsible for the collaboration of product recall, reputational risk, trade distribution, war, terrorism, physical violence, and special contingency lines of coverages. His main focuses are product recall and reputational risks, where he specializes in the placement of global product recall, contamination, and brand damage insurance policies. Next up, we have Neil Kempston from Beazley. Thanks, Neil. Neil is an incubation underwriter. So as an incubation underwriter, his role is to discover, design, develop, and underwrite brand new insurance propositions. A key focus of Neil's day job is the incubation for the incubation underwriting team at Beazley is on intangible assets. So reputation making a significant part of the protection gap that Beazley wanted to address. Neil is primarily focused on working with brokers, clients, and underwriting reputational risk solution has been something that the team at Beazley have launched back in February 2021. Next up, we have Parul Amin from Polecat. Hi, Parul. So Parul is a director of product experience at Polecat and works with customers who are senior professionals in the communications, corporate affairs, risk and strategy departments. She is passionate about helping customers find new opportunities to engage stakeholders and inform key company initiatives, from brand amplification and content campaign to product innovation, corporate strategy, influencer identification, and risk management. Please do ask any questions you have in our Q&A chat box, and we will definitely ask the questions that you would like to ask our panel too. But to kick off, Neil, what are the key stats around reputation that we see today?
Thanks, Rosie, and thank you for that kind introduction. There's a lot for us on the call to live up to as panelists. So key stats around reputation, Ivan touched on a few, but I'll go through a few in more detail. So reputation's always been very important to companies. So when we were looking at the stats around this, when we were developing our solution, we wanted to identify the dynamics that have changed over recent years. It's helped us to develop a proposition that would best suit the types of clients in our appetite that we want to work with. One of the points Ivan mentioned was around the value that intangible assets make up. So if you look at the total value of an organization, there's been a shift from the tangible to the intangible assets, and it can be up to 80% of an average company total value being made up of intangible assets. And of that 60 can often be reputation. So it's a huge hulking asset for organizations that are out there. There was a survey conducted in 2018 by Accenture. They spoke to 30,000 consumers across 35 different countries. And the key finding there was that 62% of those consumers find brands with high ethical values more attractive. Now, if you combine this with the fact that there's been an 80% increase in scrutiny on business conduct since 2016, and activist protests on that nature targeting businesses doubling in the same period, with the fact that up to 90% of companies report having inadequate access to data to understand and manage their reputation, this creates this sort of perfect opportunity and time to develop a solution such as we have, and for the market to respond to this key risk. There are thousands of super producers walking around the world, or journalists, as Ivan mentioned. So you don't have to be a journalist to be a journalist these days. They're walking around and interacting with brands that they actually may be buying from or may not be buying from. They're interacting with those companies in more ways than ever before. The public have obviously freedom of speech, but they also have freedom of reach. So the commentary that can be surrounding a company can come from anywhere. So in summary, around those stats, my key points are: there's more to protect, there's more attention and focus on organizations, and the access to information to understand that is often complex and difficult to get to.
Thanks, Neil. That's really insightful. Matt and Parul, it would be great to hear from both of you on how important you think this topic is for clients, and what role you think the insurance industry can play in helping our clients. And I guess with that, we've just lived through the pandemic or are living through, and multiple lockdowns. So with this backdrop, has this accelerated the priority of this topic? And are there any evolving trends that we're seeing?
Thanks, Rosie. I'll break that down. First of all, hi everyone. It's good to be talking with you all. I suppose first of all, we're talking about public perception of brands here. So brands, and that's remains the most one of the most important assets a company has. What's changing now, however, and I think Neil kind of alluded to it, is consumers' expectation of those brands. We hold brands to a lot higher standard now. And so, things like information, disinformation, is widely available for consumers to, make their opinion on, and of course, opinions, heavily subjective. Just to liven this up, I'll give you a live example, which I've got to be careful what I say because I'm actually handling it at the moment. Recently, and it's a pretty standard benign event, but an SME restaurant contamination chain that I work with. An SME restaurant chain recently had a contamination. It wasn't even a contamination; it was just one individual claiming that they were made sick from their product. Now that's, like I said, a pretty benign event, and it's something that restaurant chains are used to. However, the dynamic now is that this actual individual is a big TikToker and has 4 million followers. So what used to be a benign event has all of a sudden become something pretty important and something they've got to respond to. And so that changing of dynamic really is quite significant at the moment. You can blow that even further. So we're talking about an SME there. You think about larger companies. I don't know if anyone was watching the Euro footballs, the football, but there was this press conference with Cristiano Ronaldo where he removed 2 Coca-Cola bottles to his left and simply, whispered in the microphone, "Aqua." Now, the next day, whether this was true or not, all news media were reporting that Coca-Cola share price dropped by 4 billion. You're allowed that the news media to make that link, whether it's true or not, it's irrelevant. As a Ronaldo fan, you may be looking at that and going, okay, wow, Ronaldo doesn't drink Coca-Cola. I've got all this press about it. I'm not going to drink Coca-Cola either. And so you're dealing with these types of events, and how do you manage that risk? And so it's so important, the risk transfer piece. With regards to the role of insurance, and Paul, please jump in at any time. But for me, it's about education. It's about making sure you have that broker who does have, knows the products, knows the market, and knows what's relevant to your risks. And it's constant education. That crisis management is changing, it is adjusting. It's moving away from, well, not moving away, but you've still got the standard terrorism. You've still got thousand kidnap and ransom, product recall. But now you're looking at products like active shooter events, crisis response products, reputational risk, of course, which we're talking about, trade disruption insurance. There are these new niche products that are coming out and becoming a lot more relevant. So I think the role, as always within insurance, is to innovate, but as brokers, it's about to educate as well. These products are out there, and you need to lean on your broker to make sure that you're learning about them. I think did I answer all the questions? I don't know. Is there any more?
And Pearl, do you have anything that you can add from your?
I think what Matt touched on it really well there, but I think I guess the key point is that you can be managing multiple risks at any one time, and I think if you have if you want to do this well, of course, you want to also anticipate some of these risks as well. So having a solution in place that's helping you see what may be coming, because I think the last thing any business wants is to have a crisis upon it that it didn't really anticipate or know was coming. So I think that's also, a key piece. And I think many organizations are juggling that. So they are juggling multiple risks, but also trying to find solutions that help them anticipate what's coming as well.
Yeah, and I think the other role that we have as an industry is to really help organizations digest this sort of very complex area, so that they can understand how we can help, but also how they can risk manage that issue so that they can react best to it.
It's handling the whole life cycle. It's not just about risk transfer. It's got to be, okay, up front, how are we managing this risk? And that Cristiano Ronaldo example I gave, how do you manage that risk? So hence why you've got the risk transfer in there as well. So yeah, it's looking after the entire life cycle, which is is why it's so important. The what Paul will talk about later on with their AI infused platform. It's dealing with the whole life cycle.
Yeah, and I think that is. Oh no, sorry. I think that is key because there are obviously other solutions out there. Insurance is just one part of the piece of the puzzle, and it is how you sort of look at it sort of as bird's eye view looking down, and then trying to break it down into jigsaw puzzle pieces and seeing how you address it. And I guess being, as I mentioned, insurance being only one part of the puzzle, like reputation insurance is actually still quite a new thing, isn't it, Neil? And we do have solutions available here in the market, but what drove you to get behind releasing a new product in this space?
So for us in the incubation underwriting team, our role is really to sort of push the boundaries of what insurance does. We have spend a lot of time thinking around what it is, who it serves, and how it should operate. And going back to the key points that Ivan and some of the stats I mentioned to earlier, this huge hulking asset of reputation is out there, and there's a protection gap both in understanding and in sort of the risk transfer component. So that was a real sort of driver for us to look into it. We're really living now in a time of unprecedented change. It seems like an obvious thing to say, having as a globe gone through a pandemic, but beyond that, it's also from a cultural, political, social, and environmental perspective, things are changing. And if you look at the kinds of organizations that our industry serves, the company boards for those are being held to account much more on their ability to mitigate the not just the financial, but all the risks around reputation, which is why it's interesting for us, because those are the types of clients that Beazley has. As I mentioned just now, reputation is very complex. It's kind of like dark matter. It can be very difficult to define or know how to properly respond and understand the information that surrounds it, which is another reason which really drove us to look at it, because as a complex space, can we look at it from an area to help make it more simple for organizations to understand and work with as a risk? Crises can come from all different areas. And Matt sort of pointed to a few good examples that, they can come from image, if you have like a damage by association challenge, if you have abusive employees, if you have bodily injuries or perceived injuries as well, like Matt pointed to, protest, activism, lots of different things can drive a crisis. It's made up of kind of three different things as we see it. Known knowns, the things you can understand and plan for. Known unknowns, the things that you can start to plan for, but you don't know how they're going to hit you. And then also the things that you have no idea about. So this is something that companies often think about. Often they'll, in this space, in the market, some of the products that are out there are named perils. You have to pick the things you're worried about. Now, I'll get to it later, but I think one of the things we wanted to do is help companies really digest the whole thing that's going to come at them from a dark matter perspective, so that we can properly prepare them. Now, as a group in incubation underwriting, we have an ongoing focus in the intangible asset space. So what we wanted to do in this area was focus on the biggest, most important part for our clients, which is reputation. And our focus as a specialty insurance company is to really develop innovative solutions for complex risks that make them easier for companies to work with.
I think just jumping on the back of that, Neil, and just some of the examples you said that can occur. Obviously, there's so many different types of things that can create a reputational harm event. But for me, the one I see more and more regularly is communication, just simple communication, internal communication from teams. I think on International Women's Day, I've certainly mentioned to you, Paul, Neil, but Burger King on International Women's Day decided that they wanted to promote a campaign with regards to getting more women into catering. And on that day, they went with the tweet, "Women belong in the kitchen." Now, that the intent is brilliant, but the actual execution, I mean, that's terrible. And of course, they got quite a lot of negative press following that. Another client Neil and I recently spoke with is major restaurant chain, and they had an incident in Taiwan where they brought out a killer deal. Now, they brought out this killer deal on a day when it was actually Memorial Day within Taiwan due to a genocide that occurred in the 1940s. Now, just think about that word, killer. Like to us, it makes sense. A killer deal, a great deal. Whereas, when you're translating that directly in Taiwan, on that particular day, it makes it's a completely different message, and hence why in Taiwan they boycotted those products for quite a while. So communication is also a key point, and you need to make sure you've got the right people in the room to make sure that we're messaging our brand to how we want to message our brand and not getting any confusion. I think the other thing is we missed on, and Neil touched on it with regards to the pandemic and how that has that escalated clients' requirement to look at reputation risk. And I can't say I see a direct correlation, but I think a lot of clients now are probably looking at how they responded to the pandemic, looking at their crisis management plans and whatnot, and going, wow, we really weren't prepared for that black swan event. What other events similar to this can occur that maybe we're not prepared for as well? And so crisis management is becoming more and more prevalent, in conversations about insurance. That's why at Lopton we've recently created the crisis management division to respond to these types of events because they're becoming more and more frequent and certainly more important to clients.
And we're seeing in some of the clients that we speak to, the crisis plans have been very recently updated. So it's becoming a more increased focus for organizations, I think, to Matt's point, as a result of what's happened over the past 18 months. So it's a growing interest topic.
Just to kind of expand and grow on that, Matt, a question for you. And you've just touched on it with the new division created at Lockton's, but how are you seeing the insurance market developing around this product and space?
So I've been working with reputational risk for a long time, product recall even longer. So I suppose take it back to, if you think about cyber products and product recall products, they are essentially reputational harm products for those specific types of events. So they provide business interruption, footfall, loss of sales, loss of contract, following a cyber event or following a product recall. Also, we've already alluded to, there's a whole number of events that can create a reputational harm incident. And so, the market has tried to respond to that. Historically, what it's done, I think Neil touched on it, is through named perils. So what I mean by this is, you've got to work with your client directly to come up with a specific peril that will lead to an adverse media event that will cause a drop in sales. Now, the issue with that is, it can be hard enough to get clients, and it can be pretty onerous to complete applications, but trying to actually come up with that specific event that is going to lead to adverse media, that's almost impossible. Do you really want to be a risk manager that spends a lot of money on a policy, but you didn't actually pick the right peril? So that's something we've been contending with for probably the last 5 years, and those are the policies that have been available by likes of Munich Re, Tokyo Marine, Kiln, Liberty. However, the real step change has been having worked with Neil and his colleagues at Beazley, where their approach is, what they're taking is an all risks approach to reputation with some certain key exclusions. So that already kind of combats that initial conversation of trying to get a client to figure out what event in the future is going to cause them a reputational harm incident. And so that's a huge and major step change. Also, it makes the product scalable. It makes it relevant to everyone. So that's something we've seen. But also encompassing, and I'll hand over to Paul here, she wants to talk as well, but encompassing the polecat piece. I mentioned earlier about dealing with the whole life cycle. There's the crisis management piece to this. So, if you have an event, you have access to crisis management responders to assist you in responding to that event, be that PR or whatnot. But before you've even have an event, you have to work with a company like Polecat, and this forms part of the policy, where that they are looking at consumer sentiment towards your brand 24/7. So any sort of event or small event they can get ahead of. Sorry, I'm probably stealing a thunder there.
You're good.
It's such a great product. Yeah, you're like, keep going. It's such a great product, and certainly something that clients should really start looking into and understanding. How you can actually when you talk about reputation, it's always so qualitative, but now you can actually put quantitative data against your reputation and how you're viewed, and it really is a step change. But you've got to make sure you've got the right broker to actually educate and be able to have that conversation, not only with the market, but with a client to really talk about what it is.
I think there's a key piece to that as well, I guess, from the perspective of course, when a crisis does happen, there is a reporting element to that as well. You've got a responsibility to report to shareholders, to investors, to the board as well. So you need data to be able to show how you've actually been able to manage that risk, and whether that risk has been something that you've been able to overcome, pretty quickly, and what steps you've put in place to do that, or whether that may be something that you see is maybe going to have longevity. So, a slightly different approach or strategy is needed. And I think that's one of the benefits of our platform, in terms of being able to pull some of that reporting directly from our platform, and send it to your key stakeholders pretty quickly, or work with us to develop the narrative that you want to add around that particular risk as well.
Fantastic, thank you. By the way, if you do have any questions for our panel, please do ask, and we will definitely try our best to include them. So I guess, Neil, you've obviously probably done hours and hours of research around reputational risk, coming up with a new product. With all this research and insight, is it the same for everyone? Or is it different for each sector? And which sectors do you think the insurance market can probably help, and are there sectors that the insurance market may not be able to help?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think I'll go back to sort of 2019, April 2019, because Beazley did have a previous iteration of this product, and it didn't really hit its stride. And to Matt's point, it was around lots of different things that drive those considerations. But the key thing was that product was trying to be everything to everyone. And reputation is, it sounds like an obvious answer, but it's true. It's very different to different types of organizations. So if you're in an oil and gas or financial services organization, it's mostly lived out in sort of a regulatory challenges and fines scenario. So if a large oil company has a problem in terms of an environmental spill, that's not necessarily going to stop people from going and filling up their car at the pumps. However, if you're a B2C, sort of a company that serves consumers and has some sort of level of social currency, the impact that a reputational effect will have is very different. So that will be lived out predominantly in an impact to sales of the products or services that you as an organization sell. So that's how we really wanted to focus our solution. And that's how we think we can make a key difference, because instead of just creating a reactive insurance product, we wanted to have something that would be able to provide risk management and the appropriate reaction in a combination with a sort of a novel approach to business interruption. So we've done that by working with our partner Polecat. Parul's here to sort of talk about in much better detail than we can. But what this does is it enables us to provide a solution for companies so that they can understand and react to reputational data signals, as we kind of touched on, access support from crisis communication experts the moment an issue develops. Now, what we wanted to do with our solution was make sure we weren't in the way of that expertise at the moment a problem occurs. So that's part of how we've structured our policy with some use of sublimits. And then thirdly, it's having protection for loss of profit. So when you're, as Parul mentioned, when you're engaging with your shareholders, they're going to want to know what's your plan, how are you interacting with it, but also how are we going to protect our value in this organization. Now, the way that we've structured our business interruption approach here is to use some historic financial metrics and some pre-agreed other metrics as well. So using those in combination means that we can provide a very sort of straightforward approach that doesn't require the use of forensic accountants. And what this means is that we're able, for our product, to pay claims every 3 months through our indemnity period, rather than months or years down the line as BI typically operates. So it's more of a proactive combined solution than a reactive later down the pole. So in terms of the types of companies we think this really relates to, B2C means lots of different things, but at a high level, that's sort of retail, healthcare, education, leisure, hospitality, media, transportation, technology, manufacturing, a lot of those types of organizations that Ivan pointed to earlier. Now, the way our product's set up is that we're able to define the way that reputational impact has on a company in terms of revenue as a way, sort of as a threshold to how our product will react. And that means that we can make that connection and therefore be able to offer that all risks component of our offering.
Thanks, Neil. We've been speaking about Polecat and hearing a bit about it throughout the presentation. Parul, it'd be fantastic if we could hear from you about this solution. What are the real benefits to clients with Polecat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just as a brief intro, we are a SaaS company with over a decade of experience in understanding how people talk about risk and reputation. Both our founders are ex-Microsoft, so we have a really strong foundation in tech. And we have a platform which is called RepVault that really provides you with the ability to look at data about your company, data about your peers, and also data about your stakeholders in real time. And what that means is that we're ingesting, that data about your company, peers, and stakeholders into the platform, and we're leveraging AI technology to display that back in terms of insights that really help you make sense of that data and help you make decisions off the back of that data as well. All of the data is interactive, so you're able to look at it to the individual tweet level. You can then therefore sort of easily sort of manage, measure, and optimize your reputation through the platform and send out reports, as I mentioned as well. We see a lot of our customers using our platform for many different use cases, but particularly, to anticipate risk, to see emerging trends, spot opportunities, track their stakeholders, and also measure KPIs as well.
Neil and Matt, this is a really great example where insurance can collaborate with AI. From your point of view, what advantage does this partnership offer our clients?
You go first, Matt. Oh, okay, great. So I'm sure I'll provide not as good an answer as you will, but however, the key thing for us is that it helps to embed risk management into an organization strategy. So from an underwriting perspective, that's great for us, but also for our clients, it means that they're able to understand and better react to issues in a way that they never have before. Now, as Parul mentioned, Polkat's not an insurtech. They've been around for a long time in this space. Their expertise is very well refined in terms of how they put this together and how they present the information so that they can react to it. It provides kind of a very clear view of the discussion that goes around a company. So it's not just social media monitoring, it's more than that. Everything that comes out into the sort of the public domain, Polkat can sort of pull into. And it's not a complex index you have to really, as an organization, get under the skin of to understand how it's reacting. It's very clear, it's very articulate, and also it shows not just the topics of conversation, but crucially from an insurance perspective as well, the sentiment that surrounds that conversation. So are people speaking about your brand in a positive or negative way, and in what circumstance? So is that around modern slavery? Is it around protest and activism? A really good example of where, when we were sort of working with a client, a US supermarket chain, where Polkat was very useful, was it highlighted where a protest was planned that the organization wasn't aware of. So it was able to pick up a potential risk on the horizon that they were then able to prepare for in the event that it was coming.
Just to add to that, and Neil, agree with everything you've said there, but for me, crisis management products can't just be, and we've mentioned it over and over again here, I know I have, can't just be about risk transfer. If the event occurs, this is a crisis we're talking about, you don't want the event to occur. So we need to do everything up front to make sure that we're getting in front of it, so that event doesn't occur. So the partnership here is exactly what we need, and what we see in other lines as well. You see within product recall, part of that's got crisis management side to it, but it doesn't have this AI infused where you can really demonstrate key proactive risk management. The partnership is absolutely key, and having that real-time intelligence to lean on, so that you can get in front of things like Neil's example, that's fantastic. But for me, I think it's key to have that AI infused piece, but you absolutely do need the backstop, because you can come up with certain, it's all well and good and having it, but it's not going to necessarily stop an event from occurring. If you've got that social media TikToker tweeting about you, it's happened already, the event's occurred. So you've got to make sure you've got that backstop of the insurance too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing to add as well is that the work that we, the operation of Polkat within our solution is not as a trigger. It's a sort of a value add component, and we think it really helps organizations understand what's going on in a way that they never have before. It doesn't set off our policy. Obviously, it helps inform us when we're looking at risk, but it really helps horizon scan. Now, what Polkat can do, and Paul will definitely be able to talk to this in much better detail than I, but their organizations are able to compare themselves against others, so they can see what their share of positive and negative sentiment compared to their competitors are, or to a range of different organizations, so they can see the key things that are affecting their industry as well. So it's able to pick up the bad things. What it's also able to do is pick up the good things. So if you've run a campaign, they're able to sort of see how that's how that's worked, or if you've operated a response with, like Matt said, the sort of combined view using your crisis response consultants, you can see the impact of that through the process and report back on it. So it provides a lot of capability and a lot of understanding in a complex space.
We've actually had a question from one of our audience members. Please, like I said, do feel free to ask any questions throughout. This is an interesting one. How can you protect against a reputation impacting a whole industry instead of just one risk? So the example they've given here is the share riding industry.
So I think, shall I give the insurer's perspective, Matt, and then do you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, sure. I think I've got an insurance perspective as well. So
no, the insurer and you're the broker.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Misspelling that. So it's obviously very difficult from a sort of a macro perspective to cover everything, and you have to be careful with that. The way that we look at things is the brands themselves, when they're affected by the crisis, have to be sort of individually named and recognized as that. Where it's a cross industry situation, that's a sort of typical exclusion you'd see in many insurance policies, and you'll find it here too. So we can't respond to everything that ever happens to all people in an industry, but where an organization is specifically highlighted for an issue, that's where we've worked for it.
So just to add to that, this is obviously usually a key exclusion within most policies. However, you can work with the likes of Munich Re, TMK, I'm sure Beazley will be open to it, and bring these types of risk to the table. These are highly bespoke policies. A lot of them, particularly the existing ones, where you have to come up with named perils. I've worked previously before with a jerky manufacturer where the concern was a macro event where it may come out that beef jerky was could potentially cause cancer. And so, that is a macro event, very hard to underwrite, but we were able to put something together. Now it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and requires a lot of information because you're completely creating a brand new product. However, it is available if you're willing to put the time and effort into it. You can get those things sorted, and all it really requires is just to ensure say yes or no. But a lot of these newfangled policies, they are very adaptable, and people like Neil are willing to take a view on things, have the conversation, progress that conversation, because we're not in a position where we want to say no. It's just whether we can do it or not. And so if that is a concern, then I think do raise it with your broker. Look in Lloyd, see if there is an option, and then at least you've done your homework. Any other questions at all from anyone?
Yeah, any other questions? If not, I have one. So do you think the risk, sort of traditional risk owners for reputation, is the risk managers, or do you think more internal conversations could be happening around managing risk as a company?
That's a great question. And I particularly like it because I have this conversation as well quite regularly. I think sales teams, marketing particularly need to get more involved in this. I think from a broking perspective as well, marketing seem to have a lot bigger budgets than risk management, because these are new policies. We've had constant issue I find is that we have kind of coming out of a bit of a hard market, and going to a client and saying you've got this new spend for this product, which potentially could be an issue. That's really tough for a risk manager to go, okay, I need additional budget. We've never purchased this before, and this is a product. It's quite complicated, but you're saying that to your C-suite is a tough conversation. So yeah, absolutely. I think marketing teams, it's about the brand. It's about protecting one of your key assets, and so it shouldn't just be about the risk management teams, but bringing in those marketing teams, those sales teams, to be like, okay, well, we've got this product here. Also, it's not, like we said, it's not just about the risk transfer piece. So using Polecat to make sure that if a marketing team is about to do a campaign, well, how is that campaign? What's the sentiment towards that campaign, and what are people talking about with regards to that campaign? So yeah, absolutely good question.
Yeah, I think as well, often we'll see it when crises happen in sort of the public domain. You probably will be able to sort of refer to lots of case studies of this, where the buck will often stop with the C-suite, and the CEO of an organization is often expected to come out and make a statement one way or another. And it's sometimes when these situations go wrong is where they come out and make a quick, statement where they think they're saying the right thing, where actually having access to expertise in that moment, or also having some training and understanding of the crisis plans that the organizations have, throughout the whole company up to the C-suite and all the owners properly identified is really important. So they know not necessarily what to say, but sometimes what not to say in the event of an issue occurring. So I think it reaches lots of different levels within a business. But I think very, very much agree with Matt's point around marketing, because some of the examples that Matt gave around where sometimes that can go wrong, but also not looking at it just from a outwards perspective in terms of generation, but also from a protection perspective, I think is really important.
And I think, you guys have been speaking a lot about, crisis plans and companies putting crisis plans in place. Do you think what they have generally is sufficient? Do you think there is a knowledge piece around needed around creating a crisis plan for reputation? Is it once your fingers are burnt, you really learn how to deal with this, and until that point happens, you're trying to sort of learn, and there's a lot of content out there, and it can be quite confusing sometimes to know what's right and what's not.
It's a real tough one. So in the product recall space, we see a lot of clients coming and asking for product recall policies once they've had an incident. And then obviously that completely changes the dynamic. And when they have had that incident, they're taking their crisis management plan off the shelf and they're dusting it off, and they're like, well, this is outdated. What's going on here? That guy doesn't even work here anymore. So yeah, absolutely. If something's not happening, then people aren't on it. But in this case, you really need to be proactive in order to be reactive. You've got to make sure that you have those crisis management bits in play. You want to know who's in your war room. If you have an event, you've got to make sure you own it, you set the tone. There's all these things in play, and there's crisis consultancy firms that can assist with that. Now, a product recall policy, part of that I know this is specific for product recall, but it includes an allowance for working with crisis consultancy firms to help develop your crisis management, crisis management documents and things. So absolutely, it's key to keep these things up to date and keep reviewing them, because when that crisis does come, that's what you're going to be leaning on. And these aren't frequent events. I think that's one of the issues here, because they're not as frequent. People kind of move on and ignore them and focus on your property and casualty type lines. But when they do come around, it is crisis, and you need as many brains in the room as possible in order to make sure that you come out the other side.
Yeah, I think to Matt's point as well, it's having that plan be more of a live document rather than something like you say, like you dust off every 5 years and double check the names are all up to date. But also to potentially working with the right crisis consultants, war game that plan to see how it would actually work. And there are sort of situations you hear about where certain organizations will war game it, and they'll literally take their C-suite people out of meetings they're in at the moment. They're in a meeting, and it could be quite an important one, but they'll drag them out and say, like, right, we're going to do the plan, like a fire drill, but a crisis drill. So that can be a really effective tool. I think being able to sort of qualify and understand those crises in your plan helps too. So you can set up the right series of processes, and we've seen some really sort of best in class stuff around that in terms of understanding how to react to crises at a local versus global level and do all the right sort of thing.
We're speeding into our last 5 minutes. I think it'd be really great if we could wrap up with you guys giving one takeaway that you would like the audience to take away from today's presentation. So Neil, do you mind if I put the spotlight on you first?
Sure. I think it would be, the takeaway I would have is really think around all the different types of crises that could potentially affect your organization. And then there's 1,000 other that you haven't thought of that no one has thought of. So there's so many different things out there that could affect you. How can you best respond to that? And what's the best solution? Now, in combination with that, there'll be a certain amount that's sort of on your balance sheet that you have reserved to protect against these sort of amorphous dark matter issues. Have a think around that and how the insurance market can provide risk transfer, but crucially what we can do and what you can really think about to take away is that rounded approach to risk management in the crisis space.
Thanks, Neil. Parul?
Sure. I think my takeaway would be is, do you have access to the right information, when an event or a crisis occurs, and hopefully, do you have access to that before one occurs? And not only is it about having the data to know, the impact of a crisis, but, do you have a tool in place that's actually going to help you understand and interpret that data? So, for example, if a crisis is occurring, is it something you actually need to action, or is it something that you think might just, pass in time? So, that would be my big takeaway is, do you have access to the data to help you actually manage and monitor that crisis? Hopefully it should never occur, but, when it does, is it in place?
Fantastic. And last but not least, Matt.
I think for me, it's just kind of alluded to already, but the world of crisis management is changing. The risks that we're coming up against, is no longer just the traditional, terrorism, kidnapping, ransom type events. Particularly for consumer-facing brands. When you're exposed to social media, take it back to that TikTok example. Where that person had 4 million followers, that's just an individual walking into a restaurant, decide, it may not even be true. They may have got themselves sick from something else, but it doesn't matter. They are posting that on their TikTok. They've got their 4 million followers. So, that's not the same, that risk isn't exposed to everyone. But it's just time to think about your crisis management, insurance products that you currently purchase, and whether they're actually fit for purpose, whether they're relevant, whether they're up to date. Active shooters across the US is a huge event that we're seeing far too frequently. But it is an event that causes, a business interruption, and something that needs to be responded, and you need those crisis management experts to hold a hand through it, because it is a serious event. So I think it's just readjusting your thinking about crisis management insurance policies, engaging with your broker, and making sure that they have that expertise, and they, I would have hoped from hearing from this, you can understand that there are those products available. And I think the other thing for me is trying to push the market. As a broker, I want more and more carriers coming into this space so we can start leveraging the likes of Neil. And get better premiums for these products, because we appreciate that as a challenge too. But yeah, absolutely, just amending mindsets with regards to crisis management, I think is quite key.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'd add is that reach out to the industry, like Matt said, speak to your broker, speak to the relevant people, reach out to us, and so we can have a discussion and talk around it, because as you can tell from the three of us and Rosie and Ivan, we're all fascinated by this topic. We love understanding how we can help as an industry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all of our panelists today. That was a really excellent and insightful conversation around a really fascinating and highly important topic. Don't forget to join our next event, which is going to be happening on October the 27th, and we are going to be looking at parametric solutions in that. Thank you all again, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great week.